Okay, so we are ready to glaze. All of your pieces have now been bisque fired, which means they've gone through their first firing at cone 06, and now they're ready with the moisture content out and ready to soak in the glaze, which is very exciting. We will use today 3 different glazes. We can look at the other one. The main ones that we're going to use are rutile green, floating blue, and then clear. We can combine the floating blue and the clear and the rutile green and the clear. We won't combine the floating blue and the green just because they both get fired at different temperatures. And so if you fire them together, one of them inevitably is not getting fired at its, ideal temperature. So we can do a little bit of combining, but we can do some combining with the clear because the clear can go at either temperature. So you can see kind of the interaction of, in this case, this piece was dipped half in the green and then half in the clear. And then where there's overlap, you can see some of that interaction between the clear and the green. Or in this one, the whole piece was dipped in the green and then just the rim was dipped in the clear. And as it ran down, you can see some of that interaction. What we will be careful of today is not getting so much glaze on our piece that, especially if we have a vertical plane with gravity, if the glaze is too thick, it runs down completely. Having your glaze be too thick can have the opposite effect. Instead of having a really thick glaze, will actually slump down and you'll get even thinner glaze in that part. And the thing that we're really going to work to not have happen the most, which is why we have wax on the bottom of all our pieces, is not to have any glaze run down your piece onto the bottom and then fuse to the kiln shelf. The glaze is essentially will become like liquid glass when it's heated up in the kiln. So if you have too much glaze, especially if you have too much glaze around the bottom and it sticks onto the kiln shelf, then hardens, the only way that we can get it off is to basically chisel it off of the kiln shelf. Not great for our kiln shelves, and obviously also not great for your piece. Here is an example of where that happened. You can see that it kind of obviously chipped this piece. This has been sanded down, which is why I can touch it now. But if you think about chiseling glass off of something, it's also incredibly sharp. So that's what I'll be really checking for today to make sure that we don't have so much glaze on a piece that it could run down completely and fuse to the kiln shelf, and definitely that we have no glaze on the bottom of our pieces that would just fuse to the kiln shelf. So what we will not do is dip our whole piece in one color for a full dip and then dip our whole piece for a full dip in another glaze, just because then you have a higher likelihood that the glaze is super thick and can run down and cause problems. We can do something like with this piece where it was dipped entirely in green and then the rim had a thicker amount of glaze because there's enough space for it to run down without running down off of our piece, if that makes sense. Those of you that have already seen the glazing in the hand building have a little bit of an understanding of this, but the glaze is essentially water with lots of particles suspended in it, depending on the different colors that we have, a different combination of particles that are floating. So our piece is now at a prime state to absorb all of the liquid, which in this case is water, and leave on it sort of like a powder coating of all of the different little bits that we want to then fuse together into our glaze. So we'll see with the first piece that we dip, you can watch how quickly your piece is absorbing the water and going from, in this case, glossy to matte, and we're left with that powder coating on the outside, which is our glaze. Any questions about glazing?
If we do want to do the full 2 colors everywhere, can we dip the one that pink being put on?
Yeah, so what we can do, especially if we're putting clear over top, is if you wanted, so with the blue, for example, that's a great question. Putting clear over the blue kind of brings out a more vibrant color in our floating blue glaze. So if you, what you can see here, this piece was dipped entirely in blue, and then just the rim was dipped in clear. So you can see where that vibrant blue is brought out by the clear. If you wanted to achieve that on your whole piece, you could sponge clear on the whole thing, where it would be enough to get this effect without being so thick, like a double dip, that it would maybe run off your piece. You can also sort of, if you wanted to, like paint a pattern with the clear on them. These are dip glazes, so they're mostly like the ideal way to use them is by dipping your piece. There are some glazes that are brush glazes, which work well with like a back and forth motion of a brush. These are not ideal for that, but you could sort of like drip some of the clear onto your piece with a paintbrush or sponge it.
Are all of them mostly dip glazes here?
All of the ones under the table are dip glazes, yeah. So work best for like, you know, the way that we're doing it, fully dipping. Some of them can also be like sprayed onto your piece, but then we have other sort of commercial glazes that are work well for brushing, yeah. And you'll see if you go back and forth with a paintbrush on these, it kind of drags the powder in a way that you don't, yeah, that you don't want. So we'll dip them, and then I'll show you when we're covering up like the marks from the tongs as much as possible. We don't want any like rubbing or back and forth motion on the glaze, because it can kind of just take that powder coating off of your piece. Yeah, good question. Any other ones? Okay, so what we'll do is mix up all of the glazes that we're using. I will put the Rutile green over here, we'll put the floating blue over there, and we'll put the clear on the corner. And then you want to pull out the floating orange with that one over here. Yeah, you want to get that. So you kind of want it to be able to get this motion, and then be able to not too awkwardly lift your arm back so that it's upside down.
I have enough space. Here I go.
Go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Perfect. And now we can see how quickly the piece will absorb all of the water. And go from glossy to matte. And then perfect. You can wipe off any glaze from the bottom of your piece. Perfect. Then carefully remove the tongs. So you can see there are 2 holes on the inside and 2 holes on the outside from where the tongs were. You can either take the back of your fingernail and just pull the glaze back over that spot.